Hello there. Let's discuss the 48 hours RT-PCR negative test result requirement to the Philippines. This is number one most important requirement you will present upon check-in. In this video, we will answer most of the commonly asked questions like, when should I take my RT-PCR test? Related to that, if you have multiple transit or connecting flights, when is your reference date and time to take the RT-PCR test? Departure time? Transit time? Or arrival time? If you are on a direct flight, then it is easy. But most of us will be flying with at least one stop or transit. Now the flight duration is very long. The question is, will your RT-PCR test result expire when you arrive in the Philippines? Will it still be accepted by the BOQ or the Bureau of Quarantine? One of the worst things that could happen is when you get a positive result. What do you do in such a case? The IATF Resolution is very specific about the test. It should be an RT-PCR test. But wait, when you get your result, some of it will read just PCR and not RT-PCR. Are these the same and acceptable? We will discuss this too. Will you be swabbed in the nose or mouth? Is saliva test accepted? Are children also required to take this RT-PCR test? Do you need a printed copy of your test result? What if you receive your result only via SMS? Will you be able to use that?
If you are flying to the Philippines, click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to get all the important updates like these. Many thanks again to your likes and feedback on the comment section. And to those who trust our channel as source of information to their travel-related questions.
Now, all these questions will be answered if we read or listen to the IATF announcement, so let's start by doing that, and then we will dig deep into the details and explanation.
International arriving passengers shall be required to present a negative RT-PCR test taken within 48 hours prior to departure from country of origin.
The IATF resolution is concise. But we have to pay attention to all the tiny details so we complete this requirement correctly.
In the IATF resolution, there are two main rules. Rule number 1. It must be an RT-PCR test. It means, antigen test will not be accepted. When you go to the testing facility, you have to be very specific. Tell them you need to go on an international flight and you need a COVID RT-PCR test. And of course, the result must be negative. If the result is positive, here are the things you need to do as per IATF Resolution 158 dated January 20th, 2022. If you are a foreign national, you have to wait until your test result becomes negative. If you are a Filipino, these are the steps to follow. Step 1. Keep your RT-PCR positive test result. Step 2. Call your airline to rebook your flight. Step 3. Contact your government and follow the required isolation protocol. Step 4. After 10 days from the day you were swabbed, until 30 days from when you were swabbed, you may take another RT-PCR test. If the result is negative, then you are good to go. But if your result is still positive and you do not have any more symptoms, go to your doctor and get a medical certificate with all these mandatory things written. Number 1. That the traveler, your complete name written, has completed the mandatory isolation period. Number 2. That you are no longer infectious. Number 3. That you have already been allowed free movement or travel. But actually, before even considering that option, you have to call your airlines if they will let you board with a positive RT-PCR test result. Otherwise, you'd have to go through asking that kind of document for nothing. Rule number 2. Your RT-PCR test must be taken within 48 hours before your flight or prior to your departure. What does this really mean? It means that the time the sample is taken from you, or the time when you were swabbed, to the time of your actual departure, the total time difference must be 48 hours, or less. For example, your flight departure is February 14th at 9:10 p.m., simply count 2 days before your flight date. We'd get February 13th and February 12th. Because your departure time is 9:10 p.m., then starting February 12th at 9:10 p.m. onwards, you can take your RT-PCR test. You have to consider flight delays, and also the speed at which the test result will be released. And of course, if the test site is open in the evening or during the holidays.
Most travelers miss this important information out. The RT-PCR test must be taken prior to departure from country of origin. I have to emphasize, from country of origin, so if you have multiple transit or connecting flights, it won't matter. If you are traveling to the Philippines, your reference will always be the country of origin.
Now we are clear about international transit, and your country of departure will always be the reference. It also means that if you have domestic flights, do not consider those domestic flights. Again, the IATF says, prior to departure from the country of origin. So your reference will always be the last city where you will exit or depart your country. So cross out your domestic flights in your computation. For example, Los Angeles, then you have a flight to Guam before your arrival in Manila. Your reference here must be your departure date and time in Guam. Now we know already that we need an RT-PCR test. But when you receive your result, it says PCR, and not RT-PCR. Are these the same thing? The quick answer, yes. Coronavirus PCR test is always an RT-PCR test. The question is, are the check-in counter staff aware of that? There were passengers who were denied boarding because the check-in counter staff does not know this. So just in case you are questioned, unfortunately, you may have to explain it to them.
Disclaimer, we are not medical professionals. What we will share with you are based on readings from online materials, such as from the US CDC website, or World Health Organization, and from other prominent medical university websites. Of course, you can always make your own research.
So let's start by explaining what is a PCR test. In a PCR test, you need a sample which contains genetic materials, specifically DNA. Trained professionals will use a PCR machine to process this sample. After processing, the virus DNA will multiply. So if you have the virus, it will be detected with very high accuracy. Now, the problem with the coronavirus is that the genetic makeup of the COVID-19 is not DNA. It's RNA. The limitation of the PCR machine is that it can only process DNA. So simply put, they have to convert this RNA to DNA. And to do that, they have to use the so-called reverse transcription method. There is no other way. A coronavirus PCR test is always an RT-PCR test.
RNA to DNA conversion must be done.
If you are still in doubt with what is written in your test certificate, then if the test name and manufacturer are written in your test certificate, you can also verify using the Google search engine. Example, in this certificate, it only says PCR. But fortunately it specified the test name and manufacturer. SARS-CoV-2 real fast to say. I checked in Google, and it is confirmed that this is a reverse transcription method. Next question, will you be swabbed in the nose or the mouth? Answer, it depends on the testing facility. Each test manufacturer will have its own instruction including what type of sample to use. If it says deep into your nasopharyngeal, then the facilitator will really follow that. It means it can also be on both nose and mouth. The airline should not check where you were swabbed because the IATF resolution only says it should be RT-PCR with 48 hours validity. Next question, is the saliva test accepted? In Japan, actually also in the Philippines, there are testing facilities that can take the saliva as the sample instead of swabbing you. So, yes, this is accepted. As long as the test method to be used is RT-PCR. What do I mean? Saliva RT-PCR test is accepted. But, saliva antigen test is not accepted.
How about the children traveling with you? 3 years old and below are exempted from the pre-departure RT-PCR requirement. 4 years old and above are required.
Should you have a printed copy of the test result? Printed copy is highly recommended. But do note that most airlines will look for a printed copy, especially if they specify it in their airline guidelines.
What if the result is only via SMS? Can you use this? Answer is no. It should have an official certificate.
Let's have a quick recap of the rules before we answer the last question. If you have a domestic flight, example San Francisco to Los Angeles, your reference is the departure date and time at Los Angeles. Another example, if you have a domestic flight from Jeddah to Riyadh, your reference is the flight date and time in Riyadh.
The question is, if you have multiple flights, and then the total flight duration is very long, exceeding 48 hours. Will your RT-PCR be considered as expired when you arrive in the Philippines? Will the BOQ or Bureau of Quarantine still accept your RT-PCR? Answer, yes, the BOQ must accept it. Why? Because the IATF resolution clearly specified that the test is to be taken 48 hours prior to departure from the country or origin. Transit and arrival date and time do not matter. But why do some passengers claim that they were questioned about the validity? Again, you may have to explain it to them. The IATF resolution clearly specified prior to departure from country of origin. Thanks for watching. If you find this information helpful, please like this video. We also appreciate your comments and feedback. Consider to subscribe to get to see more updates like these. See you on the next update and have a safe flight to the Philippines.